Hi, it's me, Kay Cook, and I'm here today with one of our Happy Brain coaches, one of our lead Happy Brain coaches, Tracey Hutchinson. And welcome, Tracey. It's really good to see you and have the opportunity to chat with you. How are you doing?
Hello, Kay. I'm all good, thank you. Nice to be here to talk all things Happy Brain.
Yay. So here we are, 26th of March 2020, very momentous time in the world, and we're all in lockdown. And whilst as this goes out as a live broadcast, that will make sense to people, but when we look back on it, I'm sure it will seem a strange time for us all. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today with regard to Happy Brain and obviously in relation to the work that we do and the book that we use as a handbook to help others to drive their happy brains is the one of the strongest emotions that we are faced with our clients and friends and family at the moment is what we would term anxiety. Would you agree that that's a big issue for us right now?
Absolutely. I've seen a lot of it, not just in kind of clients. I was going to say face to face, but computer screen to computer screen, which is as good as it gets right now. But also a lot of the stuff that I read on social media and in the press. And I can understand why it's a fearful time.
So you mentioned screen to screen, and of course we're very busy at the moment because so many people are requiring some support through this difficult time. Have you got a relevant example of somebody that you've worked with recently who's expressed anxiety, particularly around COVID-19?
I've actually spoken to quite a few people experiencing fear, anxiety, and panic in places where they might not normally experience that. Quite often, people who have experienced something like it before in other circumstances, so they recognise the feeling, and I think that's really key to how they then respond because they think they recognise the feeling, and so their response is then automatically followed. And they are what they've expressed is a concern about having it in the first place because it's really starting to restrict their lives, not being able to go shopping, not being able to go outside for fear of meeting people, and so on. But what they've also said is, what happens if this becomes my normal? What happens if when all of excuse me, all of this is over, I still feel like this? So they recognise that there probably is something to be anxious about, in as much as nobody wants to be poorly. We do feel a little bit out of control, all of those things, where it's very natural and normal for our response to be, oh, hang on, we need to be a little bit careful and do something a bit different. But their concern is, so what happens if I then learn that this is how we do business, that this is how we do that response, and even when all of this has gone away, I'm still like that, that it has made me like that. And I think that's kind of almost two responses. There's the immediate response, which in some ways is probably valid and uh, you know um, a good thing to have concerns and to take things carefully and so on. But then there's the ongoing, yeah, what happens if I then stick like this as well?
So, so I think what I'm hearing from you, I've just made sort of a note. Three words. There's different types of anxiety, isn't there? There's the anxiety that hijacks somebody. It just seems to come out of nowhere, catches somebody totally by surprise. There's the anxiety that builds, the thoughts, the feelings, the thoughts, the feelings. They build and build and build and then sort of explode like a volcano. And then there is the anxiety that what they've experienced will generalize throughout the rest of their lives. And that reminds us that that part of our brain that likes to predict things is kind of doing a good job, really, which is saying, you know what, you might have to be like this for the rest of your life, so let's just explore that just in case. But it requires some challenging to put it back into a box, a place that is manageable. And the word that I hear a lot of, and I know you do too, is people want to perceive they have some control over their thoughts and feelings and behaviours. The hijacky kind of anxiety, panic attack, if we just put that aside for one moment and focus more on something that we have an easier influence over, which is the thoughts, the feelings, the behaviours that cycle and cycle and cycle until they're too big. How do you, what would be a simple tip that you would give or have given to somebody recently to help them to pull back a little bit from that runaway motor?
I think the very first thing, and probably one of the most useful things, is to understand what it is that's actually happening in the brain. And once people, it seems, understand the processes that are happening, I think people feel like they possibly have a little bit more control over it, because I think people feel they don't have any control over what's happening, the situation around the virus. We're all being told what we should and shouldn't do. We have had choices removed from us, all of those sorts of things. And so the one thing they can learn to control is that cycle. And understanding that that is possible seems to be a really major factor for people.
I feel that any model that helps somebody to understand what is happening is vital. I believe so strongly in having a model that your brain can help you to make sense of the world. And all models are useful, none of them are perfect. It is my philosophy. And of course, you and I share the happy brain model, which helps people to see their thinking, their feelings, and their behaviours through a three-part system. Do you think that we talk about in Happy Brain, we talk about the brain from the top down, thinking, affecting feelings, affecting behaviours, and also from the bottom up. So the physiology affects the emotions, which in turn changes the way we talk to each other. And of course, it feels in the world right now that people are squashed because they may be under par physiologically, because they are, maybe not getting enough exercise, not getting good quality sleep, losing the connection with other people, all of those things that are vital to our well-being. So they're affecting the physiology from the bottom brain up. And also they're being bombarded with a social narrative of fear. So that sort of emotional brain right in the middle is kind of getting squished from both ends. How do you find, what's a simple way that you use to help your clients to just understand enough about how their brains work?
I do use the model. I do take them through the model, but actually, and this would possibly be my answer no matter what question you asked about what was an easy way to just understand and take back a little bit of control. And it's about breathing and just being able to stop and notice what's happening, notice the cycle, if it is a cycle, and it usually is, and to be able to breathe. Balloon breathing, one of your kind of first aid, balloon breathing exercises. And I think without fail, that gives people space to then be able to decide what to do next. And also, well, it gives them space to understand, to recognise a little bit more about what's happening in their bodies, and where they do notice that cycle. You know, this is going to sound weird if people are not familiar with Happy Brain, but doing things like making the cycle go the other way, or slowing it down a little bit, or moving it somewhere else, or something else, is such a powerful way to just give people space, so that they don't feel like they're getting caught up in that maelstrom of everything that's happening around them.
And it's that thing about directing attention on purpose. It's such a gift, isn't it, to be able to say, right now, what are you experiencing in your right toe? Because until this moment you hadn't thought about it. And, you know, are you breathing from the top of your lungs, or are you breathing right down to your diaphragm right now? And you hadn't thought about it until I mentioned it. So the power that we have to be able to influence where people's attention goes is enormously impactful and helpful, isn't it? Yeah. So, and
I'm curious to know what your go-to might be in those circumstances as well.
Probably much the same. You know, my first aid kit of skills, it would always start with stabilizing somebody, body symmetry, straightening up, giving the body messages to say to the brain, I'm okay. Because if you can sit up straight or stand up straight and symmetrical and balance, bring your attention into that, it's already changing the chemistry and the fear chemistry and the fear thoughts. And then the deep breathing to switch on the parasympathetic nervous system. And just bringing people's attention to something other than the thing that they've locked into, and then begin to help them to realize that their brain body is doing a magnificent job in trying to keep them safe. Might be a little bit outdated. It might need something new in the toolkit. But you know, we have to start with that appreciation of where we're at. You're doing a great job. You know, that hyperventilating, that's because, you know, the brain, for its own reasons, believes you're going to suddenly need a big power boost of oxygen. So let's hack it. Let's bring it back to, because you don't need that. So let's reset it and reorganize it. Because I feel, I don't know whether you experience this, but I hear so many people trying to fight within themselves or control things in a way that sets up a dissonance, a friction within them, and that just makes things 1,000 times worse. So there's something about acceptance and breathe and just take a snapshot of where you're at right now.
Yes. I think I know you've often described before watching a dog that's had a fright, and once it's dealt with whatever it is that it's dealt with, it has a good shake and shakes off all of those fight or flight hormones that are getting it ready to do something, even if it hasn't actually had to do anything. And I often wonder what it would be like if we as humans just started to do that when we recognise that we've had a bit of a something, and just have a good shake, because I'm sure the world would be a better place.
Well, and that brings us to a whole range of other sort of alternative practices, doesn't it? You know, one of the great things for me that's come out of the last few days is I've brought my attention back into Qigong, which I used to love doing. And so there's a local girl who's been posting on Facebook some Qigong lessons in her garden. And I've followed along and thought, oh yeah, I remember how much I really enjoy this. And just remind, I'm a big fan of traditional Chinese medicine and yogic practices and so on. But one of the things that she does is that shaking, and energetically there is something really important about shaking up all of that intense sympathetic nervous system energy, the stress energy. So
absolutely,
it's really good.
When I teach riding, I teach something called centered riding, as in the middle, not the smelly candle version. And one of the kind of the four basic tenets of it is being centered and learning how to do that. And when you're riding, bring everything back to the center, and the impact that that has not just on us as riders, but also on our horses. And it kind of constantly makes me wonder about energetically when the world is in such a place of scattered energy, and it just feels like it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Actually, we're having an impact on the person next to us, on the animals around us, on all of that kind of panic feel. And actually, if the world could just take, I understand things have to be done really, really quickly, and it's right and proper that all of that should be done, but just somehow just having a breath to allow things to settle somehow for our.
Yeah, that's absolutely on my radar at the moment, and I've done a few sort of conference calls with various people and around this issue of coming back to still point and center. And I think it's really important to be able to do that. And the model, I've just pulled out my notebook, which I was talking through to a company earlier today, which is this axis of high and low energy. So knowing where we've got high energy and low energy, and a feeling, an emotion that we want more of, and an emotion that we want less of. And so sort of separating these four quadrants, which I know you've seen this model before. I think the point that you're making is really important, that we can all back at least to standing in the center, like when we're kids and we can stand on a seesaw and just find that balance place where we can go either way. Unfortunately, though, in our work, we see a lot of people who've only ever habituated a comfort zone. That's way around, isn't it? A comfort zone that's sort of over here. And so that's their stable point, either sort of anxious or switching off. And so you say come back to still point, come back to a balance point, but I guess what we become aware of is, where is that? Because some people, their normality is still over here, so we have to ever so gently persuade them to move across a little bit towards a different kind of experience, so their brain knows where to go. Time.
Yes, but that's what's so fantastic about the brain and Happy Brain, that it is possible to learn new strategies, to fire off new neural pathways, to switch off the old ones, to learn a more helpful behaviour, so that our bodies are comfortable in that new place, rather than in the frantic manicness. And I've certainly, again, on social media, I do other things as well, not just look at social media, but there has been quite an increase in people sharing really positive stuff, and like your lady about the Qigong and so on, which is just amazing. People's generosity in understanding that that's what people might be needing right now has been tremendous. I think, and it's something we should I think it's something we should focus on, but I also hope that it's something that when we go back to whatever the norm is going to be, that actually some of that remains as well.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. I think that there actually could be a lot of good that will come out of this in the fullness of time, and collaboration and focus on what's really important to us. And you know, the sense of connectedness in new and novel ways is all going to be part of that.
Yeah.
Tracey, thank you so much for your time today. I hope that you'll agree to do this again. So I know we can chat for many hours about many things that interest us, and hopefully are of interest to other people too. Just one quick thing on a personal level. This confinement for you. What's a thing that you have been able to dive into that has surprised and delighted you?
I think as you know, there's been quite a lot already, but the very first thing is increasing my yoga practice and remembering how good it is. And I've even got my partner doing it. And if listeners would know what an achievement that is, it's amazing. So we're doing it together, and it's it doesn't matter what it looks like or anything else at all. It's just so nice to be able to do that together. How about you?
Well, I've tidied my office. Couldn't previously get into because it was a bit of a storage dump area, and I've cleared a space in the spare bedroom for yoga practice as well. So yeah, I think those have felt really good things, and just that inward attention on what does my body need, rather than overriding it with what I must do.
What you should do, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, interesting times.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much. I look forward to speaking to you again. Keep up the great work. You're highly valued in the world for a whole range of reasons, and especially valued by me and the rest of the Happy Brain team for what you do for us, and helping the world to be a little bit better than it was yesterday. So and upwards, and it's good to chat with you.
Okay,
Thank you,
speak
Tracey.
soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.